The truck rumbled along through the dark, over bumpy streets at first, then at a higher speed over a smooth highway. There were no windows in the back, so it was impossible to see where we were going. Not that I would have known anyway, never before having been more than half a dozen blocks from home. I think we drove for about 2 hours, but it might have been less before the truck slowed and turned and finally came to a stop. The back doors were opened again, and through the wire wall of the cage I saw that we had come to a building, very modern, of white cement and glass. It was square and big, about 10 stories tall. Night had fallen, and most of its windows were dark, but the platform to which our truck drove us was lighted, and there were people waiting for us. A door opened, and 3 men came out. One of them pushed a cart, a hand truck piled with small wire cages. The man beside him was dressed in a heavy coat, boots, and thick leather gloves. The third man wore heavy, horn-rimmed glasses and a white coat. He was obviously the leader. The men from the truck, the ones who had caught us, now joined the men from the building. "How many did you get?" asked the man in the white coat. "Hard to count. They keep moving around, but I make it between 60 and 70. Good, good. Any trouble?" "No, it was easy. They acted almost tame." "I hope not. I've got enough tame ones." "Oh, they're lively enough, and they look healthy." "Let's get them out." The man with the gloves and the boots then donned a wire face mask as well and climbed in among us. He opened a small sliding trap door at the back of our cage. A man outside held one of the small cages up to the opening, and one at a time we were pushed out into our individual little prisons. A few of the rats snarled and tried to bite. I did not, and neither did Jenner. It was obviously futile. When it was finished, the man in the white coat said, 63, good work." A man from the truck said, "Thanks, Dr. Schultz," and we were racked on the hand truck and wheeled into a building. Dr. Schultz, I did not know it then, but I was to be his prisoner and his pupil for the next 3 years. We spent the rest of that night in a long white room. It was, in fact, a laboratory, with a lot of equipment at one end that I didn't understand at all then. Bottles and shiny metal things and black boxes with wires trailing from them. But at our end held only rows of cages on shelves, each cage with a tag on it, and each separated from its neighbors by wooden partitions on both sides. Someone came around with a stack of small jars and fastened one to my cage. A little pipe led through the bars like a sipping straw, drinking water. Then the lights were dimmed and we were left alone. That cage was my home for a long time. It was not uncomfortable. It had a floor of some kind of plastic, medium soft and warm to the touch, with wire walls and ceiling. It was airy enough, yet just the fact that it was a cage made it horrible. I, who had always run where I wanted, could go 3 hops forward, 3 hops back again, and that was all. But worse was the dreadful feeling, I know we all had it, that we were completely at the mercy of someone we knew not at all, for some purpose we could not guess. What were their plans for us? As it turned out, the uncertainty itself was the worst suffering we had to undergo. We were treated well enough, except for some very small, very quick flashes of pain, which were part of our training. And we were always fed well, though the food, scientifically compiled pellets, was not what you would call delicious. But of course we didn't know that when we arrived, and I doubt that any of us got much sleep that first night. I know I didn't. So in a way, it was a relief when early the next morning the lights snapped on and Dr. Schultz entered. There were 2 other people with him, a young man and a woman. Like him, they were dressed in white laboratory coats. He was talking to them as they entered the room and walked towards our cages. 3 groups, 20 for training on injection Series A, 20 on Series B. That will leave 23 for the control group. They get no injections at all, except to keep the test exactly even, we will prick them with a plain needle. Let's call the groups A, B, and C for control. Tag them and number them A1 through A20, B1 through B20, and so on. Number the cages the same way, and keep each rat in the same cage throughout. Diet will be the same for all. When do we start the injections? As soon as we're through the training with the tagging. We'll do that now. George, you number the tags in the cages. Julie, you tie them on. I'll hold. So the young woman's name was Julie. The young man was George. Here's a picture. They all put gloves on, long, tough, plastic ones that came to their elbows. One by one, we were taken from our cages, held gently but firmly by Dr. Schultz, while Julie fastened around each of our necks a narrow ribbon of yellow plastic bearing a number. I learned eventually that mine was number A10. They were kind, especially Julie. I remember that when one rat was being tagged, she looked at it and said, "Poor little thing, he's frightened. Look how he's trembling." "What kind of biologist are you?" said Dr. Schultz. "The poor little thing is a she, not a he." When my turn came, the door of my cage slid open just enough for Dr. Schultz to put his gloved hand through. I cowered to the back of my cage, which was just what he expected me to do. One hand pressed me flat against the wire wall, then his fingers gripped my shoulders. The other hand held my head just behind the ears, and I was powerless. I was lifted from my cage and felt the plastic collar clip around my neck. I was back inside with the door closed in less than a minute. The collar was not tight, but by no amount of tugging, twisting, or shaking was I ever able to get it off. I watched through the wire front of my cage as the others were caught and tagged. About 6 cages down from mine, on the same shelf, I saw them put a collar on Jenner. But once he was back in his cage, I could see him no longer. A little later in the morning they came around again, this time pushing a table on wheels. It was loaded with a bottle of some clear liquid, a long rack of sharp needles, and a plunger. Once more I was lifted from the cage. This time George did the holding while Dr. Schultz fastened one of the needles to the plunger. I felt a sharp pain in my hip. Then it was over. We all got used to that, for from then on we got injections at least twice a week. What they were injecting and why, I did not know. Yet for 20 of those injections, they were to change our lives forever.